Good morning, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order of the TRPA Operations and Governance Committee. Today is Wednesday, April 24th, 2024, and it is 8:39 a.m. Mario, may we please call the roll to determine a quorum?
Ms. Bowman,
Here.
Mr. Bass,
Here.
Ms. Dis, Ms. Gustafson, Ms. Hill. Here. Ms. Lane.
And I am here as well.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to go over the remote and in-person meeting rules for the day. For members of the public who are joining us remotely, to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Governing Board Hybrid Meeting for April 24th, 2024. There you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address the committee members directly with your comments, please raise your hand in Zoom by clicking Raise Hand at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. With your hand raised, you will be unmuted by TRPA staff and will have 3 minutes to address the committee. If you've used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and be unmuted. For items that are agendized as informational only, we will hear public comment during the general public comment period at the end of the meeting. Comments on items agendized for action or possible action, we will hear public comment before the committee takes any action. To our remote committee members, of which there are 3 of you at this time, if you wish to speak, you can also now raise your hand in Zoom. You will find the hand icon on the bottom of your screen. Remote members may not use the chat box to make any comments or to have sidebar conversations. Please, everyone, remember to mute your mic unless speaking to cut down on background noise. Finally, I would also like to ask that all remote members turn on their cameras if they are able. Members of the public who have joined us in person, please raise your hand at the appropriate time for public comment. You will be called on to speak in the front of the room. Committee members who are in person, do you mind if I skip that part since it's just me? I will behave. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda, Madam Executive Director?
No changes.
We will deem the agenda approved as posted for the record. We're now on agenda item number 2, approval of the minutes. We have a draft set of minutes from March 27th on page 9 in your packet. Does any member of the committee wish to make a change? Seeing no hands raised, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So, second.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Hill and Mr. Bass. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion carries. Maria, going forward with the other items, do we have to do a roll call vote? Okay, but this one was okay to do as we did. Okay, perfect. So that brings us to agenda item number 3, which is the recommendation of approval of the March financials. Information on this item can be found on page 69 of your packet. I would like to call on Ms. Salisbury, who is online, to present this item.
Hi, good morning. My camera is not working, but I will proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Kathy Salisbury. I'm the finance director for the agency, and I'm filling in for Chad Cox, the new chief finance and administrative officer, while he's traveling. He will be presenting the treasurer's report later in the agenda, and I'm presenting agenda item number 3 and recommending the approval of the March financial statements. I would like to start off with a budget update. There are still significant budget concerns in California. The legislature voted in April to cut the budget deficit by $17 billion, which included drawing from the rainy day fund and $1 billion in cuts to the transit and intercity rail capital program. Budget discussions are ongoing, and we will hear more in the May revise and the final budget deal in June. The annual report and the audited financial statements for TRPA went to the Assembly and Senate in April and did not require any discussion. They were approved. In Nevada, a similar report, the annual reports went to the Interim Finance Committee in April. Chad, Kim, and Devin attended the meeting, and the reports were approved and dismissed without further discussion. Nevada has a 2-year budget cycle. So the next budget we prepare for them will just be from July 2025 through June 2027. Chad and Devin will attend the May 14th Board of Examiners meeting for the release of the staff salary increase request that we submitted to Nevada in March. Approval of these funds at this stage is largely a formality. Next slide, please. Now to talk about some budget highlights. We are 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year, making the benchmark 75%. There are no major financial surprises to report. The revenues are showing at 59% of the budget. The planning fee revenues are measuring at 68% of the budget, and this is slightly higher compared to this time last year. It can be explained by the fee increase that kicked in at the end of January. We're slightly lagging from the 3-year average, but that comparison includes the above average 2022 year, which you can see the spike on the grant in the middle. So with that unusually high revenue year, we are expected to see a slight lag in the 3-year average. The shoreline fees and AIS fee revenue are seasonal and are tracking normally at 63% year to date. As we get closer to the boating season, the gap should close. Most of the revenue lag is due to the grant funds. We have 3 grants in particular that have had some delays. So we have a Forest Service grant that is for forest health and stormwater, and we just had a delay in the paperwork, but the paperwork is in place now, and we'll work hard to get caught up over this multi-year life cycle grant. The housing grants in California, known as REAP, Regional Early Action Planning, and HIT, High Intensity Transformative Grants, have been halted because of the budget deficit in California. The housing program cuts, including the TRPA REAP and HIT grants, were not part of the budget cuts discussed in California in early April, but we don't know what will happen in the final budget cuts coming up in June. The Assembly budget subcommittees were witnessing testimony on how the REAP funds have been obligated already, and the involved process the MPOs have already taken to access these funds. I heard some good news yesterday, just cautiously, possibly thinking that we might be able to be hopeful for the rest of the year, but I would take that very cautiously. Staff will continue to monitor the situation. The expenses are running at 51% of the budget. Compensation is on track at 69% of the budget. This is normal to lag slightly this time of year. We do have a year-end payroll accrual that bumps that up at the very end of the year, and we have just filled all the open staff positions, including the seasonal positions like boat crew. The contract expenses are lagging more than normal at 38% of the budget. This is the delayed Forest Service REAP and HIT grants discussed earlier, and they just affect the expense side as well as the revenue side. The second debt interest payment of the year is due in June and will also increase expenses, but that doesn't happen till the very end of the fiscal year. Next slide, please. This chart shows the breakdown of revenue by category. The anomalies on this chart are lagging grant revenue at 25% for the reasons already discussed. The state revenue and local revenue are mostly collected up front, so that is normal even though it's showing ahead of the benchmark. The other revenue category shown at the bottom at 518% is primarily investment revenue. Historically, it hasn't been this high, so the budget of $100,000 was just an estimate, but it's nice to see year-to-date returns being above average, so we're going to take that one. Chad will give you a more thorough view of the investment yields as he covers agenda item number 6, the treasurer's report. Next slide, please. This shows the expenses broken down by category. They're all on track apart from the contract expenses shown at 38% of the budget, and that's the same Forest Service REAP and HIT grants delay. Next slide, please. Here's the cash flow. The graph on the left shows historical years laid over each other. The graph on the right shows a solid line for cash flow, including mitigation funds, and a dotted line for cash flow without mitigation funds. TRPA has dispersed $5.1 million through March, and the majority of that is the $3.7 million disbursement to CTC recently for the purchase of the Motel 6 acquisition. It's normal to see these large numbers because the mitigation funds are meant to be accumulated over years and then spent in larger portions to make a big impact. That's the end of the presentation for agenda item number 3, unless there are questions.
That was a great report, Ms. Salisbury. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any of my colleagues online have questions at this point? I'm not seeing any hands go up. I would just like to, it's really great news about the investment monies being so strong, because if we don't get that 60,000 for the HIT grant, it's good to know that we've got that cushion. I'm thinking that's where that's going to come from. Okay. And then the reading back on the minutes of the meeting I missed last month, Mr. Kyler, who was still with us at that point, he was very concerned about the planning fees. Has that picture changed, Ms. Salisbury?
I would say it's running as expected. I think we're all concerned about the things we can't control. So I would say with the fee increase at the end of January, with the building season coming up, the numbers are looking pretty normal to me. I think the primary concern is we look a few years back, just like investment revenue. The farther you look back, the better indication you're going to have. With that spike in 2022, I think it's just that was unusually high. So I'm feeling okay about it. It will definitely be more telling as these are March financials. As we come into May, we'll see April financials where the building season will pick up, and we'll know more in the next 2 months.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm still not seeing any questions of my colleagues, so we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. Are there anybody in the room that would like to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to online. Is there anybody online that would like to comment?
Madam Chair, there is no public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comment. Are there any further comments from the committee? If not, I will entertain a motion. I'm not hearing anybody come through, so I'll go ahead and just put, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Excuse me, I'll make a motion to recommend to the governing board to approve the March financials.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Okay, Maria, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Dis, Ms. Hill.
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson. And Ms. Lane.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All right, thank you. We'll move to item number 4. This is discussion and possible recommendation for release of the City of South Lake Tahoe's mobility mitigation funds and air quality mitigation funds towards construction of the Bijou Park Class 1 bike trail. This item can be found on page 89 of your packet. Ms. Campbell from the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency is online to present this item. Ms. Campbell?
I'm online and in the room.
Oh, wow. Hi.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Tracy Campbell with the EIP department here at TRPA with this request from the City of South Lake Tahoe for $481,000 in mobility mitigation funds and $183,581 for the Greenway Connector Trail. These funds will go towards construction of just over half a mile of bike and pedestrian trail linking the Tahoe mobility project with phase 1B of California Tahoe Conservancy's Greenway Trail. This is an EIP priority project to advance transportation thresholds, which will further the goal of providing alternative modes of transport and importantly, reducing carbon emissions and VMT. I did want to note, this is the first request for mobility mitigation funds. You may remember that end of 2022, you approved that update from air quality funds to mobility mitigation funds to really focus those monies on VMT reducing projects. So this is a perfect fit for those funds. We're joined online by civil engineer from the city, Stephen Anderjack, if you have any questions on the project. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. This is a perfect fit for reduction of VMT. That's great. Do any of my colleagues have questions on this item? I'm not seeing any hands raised. We'll now go to public comment on this item. If any member of the public who's in the room would like to speak to this item, please come forward. And seeing none, we will go to our Zoom callers. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak to this item, Madam Maria?
Madam Chair, there's no one online to make public comment.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the committee. Is there any further discussion or a motion?
Sure, yeah, I'll put a motion. Before I do, I'll just say, yes, the city, we're extremely excited for this project. It really will link a lot of our trails to the Greenway, and it's just a great project. So with that, I'll put a motion to recommend the governing board approve the release subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, may we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Dis, Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Gustafson, Ms. Lane.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
Excellent. Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 5. This is discussion and possible recommendation for release of City of South Lake Tahoe operations and maintenance mitigation funds in the amount of $21,092.06 and air quality mitigation funds in the amount of $54,685.35 to cover the cost of carb compliance upgrade for 2 ex-broom street sweepers. This item can be found on page 89 of your packet. And Ms. Campbell, would you like to present this item?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Tracy Campbell with the EIP department here at TRPA. This request is a kind of an add-on to a request you saw last month from the City of South Lake Tahoe. We're looking for additional funds towards the upgrade in the carb compliance. So you approved that mitigation request for 2 sweepers last month, which will replace 2 failing units. And since then, city staff were able to ascertain that that original quote was for non-carb compliant units. And obviously that is required by California regulation. So this request is just to cover that additional upgrade, which is pretty pricey, but really important. And as a reminder, street sweepers reduce sediment and help prevent those fine particulates from making their way to the lake. It's a really critical piece in meeting TMDL pollutant load reductions. As with the previous request last month, the city will be providing matching funds using their Measure S general funds. And again, we have Stephen Anderjack with us on the line to answer any questions.
Excellent. And I'm sorry, I notated the wrong page. This item can be found on page 895 in the packet. Do my colleagues have any questions regarding this request? And seeing none, I will go and ask the public, is there anybody in the room that would like to comment on this request? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and go to our Zoom.
Madam Chair, there's no public comment online.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and close public comment and bring this back to the committee for further comment or a motion.
Sure, I'll make a motion to recommend the governing board approve the release subject to the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. We have a motion. Is there any further discussion from the committee? Seeing none, Maria, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Bass,
Yes.
Ms. Bowman,
Yes.
Ms. Gustafson, Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Dis, and Ms. Lane.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes.
All righty, moving right along. That brings us to agenda item number 6, which is our quarterly treasurer's report. Information on this item can be found on page 371 of the packet. And I'd like to pass this item on to Mr. Cox, who is joining us online. Mr. Cox,
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair.
good morning.
Like Kathy here, I'm trying to join the video and it's saying that I cannot start my video because the host has stopped it. So if you guys want to see video, maybe get that going. Otherwise, I can just walk through it like Kathy did.
Okay, carry on.
Great, thank you. Hey, first, I'm excited to be presenting to y'all this morning. And I did want to thank Kathy for covering the monthly financials while I'm traveling today. I'm remote. I had something planned before I joined, so thank you. I'll be brief and walk through the treasurer's report this morning. First, Kathy showed the cash flow charts in the monthly financials. And we're in that part of the year, from what I understand, where we use the state funds basically to fund operating activity. We had to move $2 million from our LAIF account to cover this net cash usage from our operating activities in the month of March. We'll continue to use cash for the rest of the fiscal year as we spend down the remainder of both states' funds. We continue to manage the investment pool very conservatively, and there are no major changes to security ratings so far through the quarter. Next slide, please. So there are two charts on this page on the left. They're both pie charts that show, one shows the asset allocation. It shows that we are heavily invested in the two states' investment pools and treasuries, with only 8% in commercial securities. That second one, or the second pie chart in the middle there, that shows the maturities. Our maturities are basically 75% of them will mature within less than a year, so we are quite liquid. In the month of March, we did have one treasury note mature, which was yielding 2.2%. So one thing that's interesting here, and I know, Madam Chair, you had a question about the other income. The good news is, as these maturities or as these securities are starting to mature at 2, we're adding them in at a higher interest rate. So we will, and I'll get to this on the next page, we will start to see actually an increase, continued increase in yields, which will be great. There are 3 more treasuries maturing in April and May, and then 1 in June. So we do have a few more securities over the next quarter maturing. Next slide, please. And here is a comparative view of how we are doing versus T-bills, money markets, and the overall market. We have seen the treasuries less than 1 year flatten out over the last quarter. And then yields for greater than 1 year are up roughly 30 to 40 basis points since December. So, bottom line here, we continue to follow our policy. We should see a continued increase in interest being paid both through Principal Group and LAIF and LGIP over the coming months as those kind of catch up to the market, and as the lower yielding securities mature and we put in new securities at higher interest rates. So with that, are there any questions on the treasurer's report?
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Any of my colleagues have questions on the quarterly reports? Financial quarterly reports. Okay, seeing none, may I just ask one question, and that is,
Please.
you mentioned that we've had to transfer 2 million in from the LAIF account. Is it the intention to have that paid back by the end of the year? Or is that money that we're just gonna fold in and not replace?
So effectively, the way I understand it, as those states funds come in at the beginning of the fiscal year, we put them into LAIF. And then we'll spend down those funds as we work through the year. So we have 29.4 total cash as it sits today. If you were to look at this, at the beginning of the year, it would have been higher per the state. So we kind of spend it down over time. So I guess theoretically, yeah, we'll put it back when we get state funding in July at the beginning of fiscal year 25, and then we'll spend
And then
throughout
we'll
the
do
year.
the same thing again. Gotcha.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. And that is why we keep that liquidity in that particular account. In the principal account, those securities they mature, most of them in less than a year, but you don't want to use them until they mature if you can.
Right. Well, and I think from what I've observed of TRPA over time is that this system seems to work well for us and is very well managed, and we're enjoying higher interest rates right now and we need it. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
great report.
they lag versus the market, right? Because we need to kind of build up over time as
Right.
what we had put in there from months ago has a lower year yield, but we'll see that continue to increase, I believe. So thank you.
Thank you. To my colleagues, are there any final comments on this item? This is an informational only item. And I do not see any of my colleagues raising their hands. Ms. Reagan is here with us in the room and she would like to comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Reagan, TRPA's Executive Director. I just wanted to say great work to Chad Cox, his first presentation as the official Chief Financial and Administrative Officer of TRPA. And I did get a report from Chris that he got his RV, Chris Kyler, our former CFO, and he is ready to hit the road very soon. So good job, Chad. Good job, Kathy. Great report. I did want to make a notation for the benefit of the public or and any of those who might be listening, just that speaks to the overall numbers and the net position of the agency. We hold in trust securities and mitigation funds. And sometimes there's a misunderstanding that those funds are available for TRPA's operations, and they're not. When a project happens, we collect a security, and those are held in trust until that project is complete, is deemed in compliance, and they are returned to the project applicant or the property owner, whoever is appropriate. Same with mitigation funds. The release that the operations committee members is recommending to the board for disbursement to the city or local jurisdictions. Those are funds that come from projects, from project applicants and property owners, and they go back into their jurisdictions to support environmental projects. So TRPA is not using those funds for their general operating needs. And I just wanted to clarify that on the record because we've had some questions about that in previous meetings. So thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Well, yes, and I think it's very helpful to our committee. We're relatively new and we're all trying to catch up and get up to speed. So that clarification and that constant reminder is really important. So thank you for adding that. Okay, we're going to go on and move on to agenda item number 7. This item is also information only. Members of the public will be welcome to comment at the final public comment item. I'd like to pass this item also on to Mr. Cox.
Thank you. So for the May meeting, we'll have a financial update as usual. And there will be an informational item for the upcoming budget. We plan to show you a preview of the 25 revenues, the corresponding expenses, and the key assumptions to set the stage for the retreat. In June, we plan to approve the fiscal year 25 budget. And then in July, there will not be a monthly financial update, only a treasurer's report. Typically in July, we are closing the fiscal year and we will report out on the 24 financials via the audited financial statements as we work through that with our auditors. Those are the upcoming topics. Thanks.
Thank you. Excellent. Ms. Hill has just joined us in the room, so welcome. I was all lonely here. Are there any of my colleagues in the room that would like to comment on this informational item, which are the upcoming topics? Seeing none, are there any of my colleagues online would like to comment on this item? And seeing none, that was informational only, so thank you again, Mr. Cox. We're now on agenda item number 8, which are committee member comments. Are there any members of the committee in the room that would like to comment on any item? Nope. Okay. Any of my colleagues online? They're so chatty today. That's the advantage of being the first one up in the morning. Okay, our final matter of business is our general public interest comment period. Are there any members of the room that would like to address the committee on any item? Seeing none, we'll go to our online.
Madam Chair, there is no one online to make public comment.
Okay, thank you. Then is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries and we are adjourned at 9:10 a.m.